Platforming heroes come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, we've got plumbers, bears and birds, crocodiles, geckos, aliens, bandicoots, dragons, squirrels, cats, hedgehogs, monkeys. And then there's Rayman, who is, well, what he is exactly is beyond me, but what I can tell you is that he's very much unlike any other platforming protagonist. Rayman first started off as a project in development for the Super Nintendo as a cooperative two-player platformer. At the time, there were only 2 people working on the game, one of which being Michel Ancel, the creator of Rayman. Ancel joined Ubisoft Montpellier as a graphic designer when he was only 17 years old. He never actually landed in the director's seat until he began development on Rayman for the Super Nintendo. After this version was cancelled due to technical limitations of the cartridge-based system, they started redevelopment on a more powerful console. And I know what you're thinking, and no, it actually wasn't the PlayStation, but the Atari Jaguar they had in mind. As Rayman's development came along, more and more people hopped on board, helping make this game a reality. Soon into development, it was decided that the game would also be developed for the Sony PlayStation so that they could take advantage of CD-based media. This is the version that most people seem to be familiar with. Rayman even ended up releasing on the PlayStation a full week before the originally intended Jaguar version. The PlayStation version is what most consider to be the superior version, as the PlayStation disc holds a lot more space than a cartridge on the Jaguar. The Jaguar version is missing some of the graphical assets seen in the PlayStation version, along with an entire segment of a level cut out entirely. The music also sounds way better on PlayStation. After obtaining critical acclaim and mass popularity, Rayman was then ported to the Sega Saturn and MS-DOS with a 32X and even a 3DO version planned. Though once they realized that the 32X and 3DO were both dick consoles that sold very poorly, both versions were cancelled. Honestly, I don't blame them. So after all of that, this right here is the end result, Rayman, on the PS1, since it's pretty much the definitive version of the game. That is, unless you want to get into Rayman Gold in the various PC releases, but I'm not getting into Rayman Gold in the various PC releases. Okay, I'll get... fine, okay. After Rayman's grand success, they released an expansion pack called Rayman Designer for the PC. It included 24 brand new, even more challenging stages and a level editor where people create levels of their own. Then in 1997, a special edition called Rayman Gold was released. It was simply a bundle of Rayman packaged together with Rayman Designer. Another expansion titled Rayman by His Fans was soon released. This contained 100 fan-made stages uploaded to the Ubisoft website. These stages were uploaded as part of a Rayman level-making contest that Ubisoft held back in the day. The prize of the winners being that their creations would be featured in Rayman by His Fans. Then, in 1998, another version of Rayman called Rayman Forever was released. This included Rayman, Rayman Designer, Rayman by His Fans, and a fridge magnet. Then, in 1999, they released another PC bundle called Rayman Fun Pack. This included Rayman, Rayman Designer, Rayman by His Fans, English with Rayman, and the making of Rayman 2. And then there was also the France-exclusive Rayman Collector, which included Rayman 60 levels, which was a level pack included in Rayman 100 levels, which also included Rayman by His Fans, but that version was only released in the Netherlands. There are so many versions of Rayman on PC! Most of them only came out in European countries like France, so if you haven't heard of most of them, that would be why. But still, they really need to port Rayman this many times. Okay, so enough about the billions of versions of Rayman. Let's take a look at the definitive version of the original release, Rayman on PlayStation 1. Rayman is a 2D side-scroller developed by Ubisoft Montpellier. It's highly regarded as one of the best 2D platformers before the age of 3D hit consoles, and then, 2 2D games gradually started to fall into obscurity. Now, despite being a huge Rayman fan for a very long time, I never actually played the first game as a kid. The first Rayman game I played was Rayman 2 on the N64. It wasn't until high school that I finally got a chance to play this game. So enough talk, why don't we pop this sucker in and give it a shot. The game opens up with an FMV sequence featuring a very melodramatic narrator explaining that Mr. Dark, the villain of this ever so bright and colorful world, steals the Great Protoon, a magical object that retains order and stability in this world. He then kidnaps the Electoons, the inhabitants of this world. And that's pretty much it. Bright, happy world made bad by big evil bad man. I mean, his name is literally Mr. Dark. There's really not a lot to this plot. With the world in peril, we call out to Rayman to save the day, who calmly assures that he'll do it from the lazy comfort of his hammock.
No problem.
This game might not really have much to offer in the story department, but it nails it in the personality department. Rayman is very vibrant and colorful. Even the title screen has a nice purple background to contrast with the yellow title. Come to think of it, I guess that's why they made Rayman's shirt purple, because it complements his yellow face. Character designs that use complementing colors are always something I can really appreciate. It's why Mario and Luigi are red and green, because those two colors are opposite on the color wheel, and they create a nice recognizable level of separation and contrast. Rayman features a Mario World-styled world map. Something I always found really cool about this one is that you view the entire thing from Mr. Dark's point of view as he looks through a pair of binoculars. I like it, it's like we're getting the villain's perspective, nervously watching as the hero inches closer and closer to us with the completion of every level. When you first start playing, the actions you can perform are quite limited. You're only able to move Rayman left and right and jump, that's really it. As you progress, you'll unlock more abilities, courtesy of Batilla the Fairy. The first being the ability to punch, throwing Rayman's fists across the screen. Using Rayman's fists, you can make for some really interesting maneuvers, such as punching above an enemy and letting the fist attack him on the way back. This is exceptionally helpful for attacking short enemies that you normally can't hit. The controls in Rayman are spot on. They're easily some of the most responsive controls I've ever used in a 2D platformer. Everything just feels so tight and maneuverable. One of my favorite aspects of this is the ledge grabbing mechanics. In most games, when the character grabs onto the edge of a platform, there's a little delay between the time the character grabs the ledge and when you can pull yourself up. You have to wait for the character's pull-up animation to finish before you can resume playing the game. In Rayman, the very frame Rayman enters the hanging animation, you can immediately jump again. It feels ridiculously smooth, and it helps keep the game's pace at a perfect level. Seriously, more games need to do this. Now, I know it doesn't really make sense to be able to jump from a hanging animation, but for real, it feels smooth as hell. Weird thing though, you don't actually have the ability to grab ledges at the beginning of the game, it's an ability you unlock. Even weirder, many of the abilities you unlock are things as basic as attacking and running. Can you imagine that? Something as simple as running being a power-up? It is in Rayman. I mean, it makes sense in the context of the game's level design, but it's just such a weird thing to have. I mean, in the first stage, you can't even attack the enemies yet. Though it may be weird, this was done so they could have a level in which you'd have to explore other methods of getting by the enemies. So it makes sense, it's just kind of a weird concept. The enemies in Rayman can be really wacky. I love the designs of some of these guys. For instance, this guy right here who fires bullets that will whack with a hammer as they zip through the air. Yeah, as if the bullet isn't enough. Give the bullet a hammer. Ridiculously overkill cartoony violence like this always manages to give me a good laugh. Some of them are also just bizarre. Like, check this guy out. He's a drum wearing scuba gear. Rayman's overall aesthetic is that of bright, colorful, cartoony fun. This game has an insane amount of personality, which is honestly something I see a lot of games today lack. I mean, I'm all for gritty, badass action games every now and then, but sometimes I just need something colorful and quirky. Rayman seems like a fairly slow-paced game since there's no run button. Well, at least not until later in the game, so you'd think a game where you can walk everywhere is pretty chill, right? Yeah, no. This game is tough. That slow pace becomes muchly appreciated once you make it to the musical world and the difficulty starts to rise. This is the part of the game where everything decides that it wants you dead. Hazards suddenly become more plentiful than ever, and the enemies just don't know how to get out of the way. Especially these bug guys. Please? Can you get... Damn it. Die, please. Thank you. Oh my god, I hate these bug guys. I can rarely seem to get past them without taking a hit, and you gotta be kidding me, there's 2 of them! These buggers right here love to give me a hard time. Yeah, these eyeball guys right here. They'll constantly fire lightning bolts at you, supplying a relentless onslaught of things to dodge, all the while in the middle of platforming. Bandland is also the first place you'll see these little guys right here, the shrink fairies. Touching one will shrink Rayman down to a portion of his size, reducing his speed, but also allowing him to fit through small gaps. You can return Rayman to normal size by simply touching one again. Some terrain will allow Rayman to accelerate to high speed, shifting the game's pace to Mach 5. These segments are usually designed without enemies, so instead of worrying about bumping into stuff, you only have to concentrate on making those jumps. And thank God for that, because some of these jumps are ridiculous. Like, just look at this bit right here. These trumpet guys blow you back and forth, giving you a short window of time to land on these platforms that get gradually smaller and smaller and smaller until they're just so hard to land on. I'm gonna tell you first and foremost, Rayman is gonna kick your ass. And because of that, you'll be seeing this screen quite often. Getting a game over in Rayman will boot you back to the title screen if you don't have enough continues. Lives and continues are also very limited, so you're either going to make constant use of the game's save feature, or you can just use the 99 lives code that these developers were ever so kind enough to include. I wouldn't blame you for using this. I mean, I did too, honestly. Just look at my life count. And you know what? I don't feel like I cheated because I still completed the levels legitimately. Having 99 lives only means that you don't have to reload the game after dying a certain amount of times, so I actually would recommend that you use it. Unless you're real hardcore, then you'll have to find the 1-ups scattered throughout the levels. Alternatively, you can also collect 100 blue orbs called tings for an extra life, though dying resets that count back to 0, so don't expect to see that happening often. For real though, Rayman may look cutesy and colorful, but this game is tough as nails. You're gonna need some mad precision and skills if you're gonna beat this game. Okay, so you finally get through Bandland, and you're greeted by Batilla the Fairy, who tells you that things are only gonna get harder from here on out. Not to worry though, because this is also where you get Rayman's most iconic power, the helicopter hair. Using this, you're able to stay airborne after a jump for a short period of time. This makes precise jumps much easier, along with allowing you to make a little bit longer jumps. Some stages will even give you the ability to fly continuously with the helicopter hair. This power-up is only temporary and will last until you've completed the level. Another temporary power-up allows Rayman to plant trees to create platforms. These levels I really enjoyed. You're constantly planting trees to try and scale a mountain as the water level rises. There's also pickups that'll give you temporary benefits, such as the gold fist that'll make your punch shoot further and hit a lot harder. There's also a health pickup that'll increase your maximum amount of health until you take enough hits to go back down to where it was before. It's very similar to the mushroom in Mario Galaxy. And finally, the last ability Rayman gets is this grapple swing move that he can activate by launching his fists at what's called a purple lum, these ring-like fairies. Using these, you can swing back and forth to new areas. Things get pretty intense when you have to go from lum to lum in succession without falling to your death. All of these game mechanics mesh and blend together to help create some of the best level design you'll find in any PlayStation-era platformer. However, getting through these levels is no easy task. Prepare to die quite often. Most games today that boast difficulty as one of their selling points often have very gritty and dark and uninviting covers. Just take Dark Souls for example. The back of the game even says, "Prepare to die." Can you imagine if it said that in the back of Rayman? It would be accurate. Despite being hard as balls, Rayman remains cutesy and fun during the entire ride. Music is no exception. Rayman sports a very energetic, brightly toned soundtrack that'll motivate your angry self to pick that controller back up and finish this game, goddammit. Yeah! The bosses are also very challenging, but not to the point where it seems unfair. Though the worst one is Space Mom. Took me a goddamn hour to beat this one, and it's all thanks to this part right here. Once you've got her down to a mere fraction of health, she pulls this move on you, and dodging it while connecting attacks of your own is a feat and a half. I can't stand bosses like this, the ones that require you to wait for a long attack cycle to finish before you can attack. Because of this, you'll have to wait a good 3 minutes just to get to the part you can't beat to give it another shot. Okay, so you've finally beaten all of the stages, and you're probably wondering to yourself, well, where's the last stage? It's not there. And that's because this is where the game decides to throw a curveball. In order to access the final level, you'll need to smash all of the cages in the game, freeing all of the Electoons. Hang on, I totally forgot to talk about these. Hidden within each stage are 6 cages. As you smash each one, you're treated to a neat little jingle and a chart showing your progress. In order to obtain each power-up from Batilla the Fairy, you'll need a certain amount of cages smashed. And then, again, to access the final level, you'll need all of the cages smashed. The final level really tests your abilities. Each segment contains level design that will test all of the power-ups that you've learned throughout the game. My favorite part is when you have Dark Rayman chasing you. He'll mimic and follow your exact path, just like the Cosmic Marios in Mario Galaxy 2. Make contact with him and Rayman's toast. The final boss fight with Mr. Dark will pit you against bizarre fusions of past bosses. Wait a minute, that's not. In the Jaguar version of this boss, some of its forms are missing entirely. I guess I'd say the Jaguar version of Rayman is kinda like the N64 version of Gex 2. It's not unplayable, but geez, there's a lot of missing stuff from it. Once Mr. Dark is defeated once and for all, the world celebrates with some fireworks, followed by the credits. It's not really much of an ending if you ask me, but Rayman's the kind of game you play for the challenge, not for the story. It's got perfect controls and top-notch level design. I wouldn't be surprised if Rayman was the game that started the whole hard but fair trend that a lot of indie games today see. I've noticed in recent years that the whole punishingly difficult action game has risen once again in popularity, with titles such as Super Meat Boy and They Bleed Pixels. I find games like this are almost like a homage to games like Rayman. Hard as hell, but with a very cutesy and appealing art style. If you like games like that, then Rayman should be right up your alley. You can still get it on the PS3 on PSN for only $6, though if you'd rather have it on PC, it's also on goodoldgames.com, also for $6. Though the PC version lacks a lot of the original soundtrack and some of the graphical assets that the PS1 version had, so I definitely recommend the PlayStation version over the PC version. So Rayman was one of the greatest 2D platformer games of its generation, but Rayman 2 takes things into the third dimension. Will he fare just as well there, or will he not? Find out next time on the next episode of Nitro Rad. So Rayman 1 was one of the greatest 2D platformers of its generation, but Rayman 3, this is